Thank you.
Thanks
Chris. Everyone for coming. Yeah, it's so nice to be in person and not be on Zoom.
Yeah, that's very exciting for us.
Yeah, so we thought we'd start by talking a little bit about why we're here, who the Freelands Foundation are, and then move on to what we've been doing whilst we've been here in St Ives. So just to start, the Freelands Foundation is an organisation that works to broaden arts education and visual arts in the UK, and they work with lots of mid-career female artists, emerging artists and teachers.
Yes, and we are here because both of us won the Freelands Painting Prize. The Painting Prize is open to every university in the country that offers an arts programme, and we both had different selection processes. So for me, I won in 2021. I went to Goldsmiths, and they sort of send an email to all the painters in the year and ask us to apply, and then I was selected through that, and then I was put forward as Goldsmiths nomination that year, and then there are normally 8 to 10 winners per year, and then I was one of those 8 to 10 winners, so this is my year, and then that one in the top there was a little bit of the show that I was in.
So it's just as we were about to graduate,
yes.
We won, and then there was an exhibition in the Freelands Gallery in London, and it was such a brilliant experience.
Yeah.
It was such a boost of confidence going out into the real world.
Absolutely.
And then it was this opportunity, this residency was open to winners of that prize. So that's why we're here.
And
really.
you were one in 2020 and you went to Lancaster.
Yes, middle of COVID. So it's really been great. That's why I keep talking about COVID. It's really great to work with Freelands, not on Zoom. So
yeah, so these were our 2 paintings that won. So this one's mine, and it's kind of teeny weeny, and then that one's Georgina's on the far end. Yeah, it was just wonderful to be finishing our degree with this boost of confidence, with a badge of honour, and springboards as we were leaving. So
we thought we'd talk a little bit about our work before coming here. So it's been 2.5 or year and a half for you, is it, since winning the prize? And we've both been frantically painting in different parts of the UK. So I wanted to start by asking what you've been doing, what your practice has been like.
So I have been painting a lot, which is lovely. My practice was very much based in intuition, in trusting my gut, and in using visual images to tell stories. I was very interested in the relationship dynamic between the viewer, the painter, and then the subject. So these few images are from my first solo show, which happened at my studio, which is a very cool space in Deptford in southeast London. It is Triangle LGBTQ Cultural Centre, and it is studios, a gallery and a bar. And I had
classic southeast London.
Yeah, exactly. It's wonderful. If you're ever in Deptford, please come down. But that's what these images are from. But it was very much about trying to communicate something that I was feeling, something I'd experienced through images, and then my process was very much based in experience, in going to work, in listening to music and just living my life. I think that I didn't have a lot of time with working just after graduating to really knuckle down into the nitty-gritty of my practice, so I was finding my process in what I was doing already. And then I had a few very cool opportunities that I got to do, which meant that what happened was I was painting a painting for one exhibition, or an exhibition and then another exhibition, which meant I was learning to try to put all these things that I was interested in into one painting. So that's what this one was, or into a series of paintings, and then this one was the last project that I had just before I came here. And again, I was finding myself just trying to all these things I learned in the 2 years that I graduated, trying to get them into one image, which was difficult, but also a really helpful challenge, I think, for coming here. And as you can see, my painting was very detailed, quite soft, moving more into realism as I was coming up towards going to this residency. What about you, Georgina? What have you been making?
So our work, it's been interesting, we'll talk more about that later, but our work is so different.
Opposite.
The total opposite. So my work is all about my relationship to place. Painting really teaches me about where I'm living, how I feel about belonging as someone that grew up in the suburbs of middle of nowhere. It feels like I feel like I'm constantly searching for my place in the world, and so I kind of use landscape painting, sometimes going into abstraction, as a way to understand where I am. So I'm always trying to interpret the landscape around me, and I've lived in a variety of places since finishing university. So I was up in Lancaster. I lived in Morecambe for a year and a half, and I was painting Morecambe Bay. I don't know if anyone's been, but it's an amazing part of the country. And then I was down in the St Ives, so not far from here, for 4 months, and that's what this painting is of. But I painted it from memory kind of a few years later. And then I was in London, and now in the last year I've been in Manchester. And so my work from the past 3 years, you can tell that's in London because it's all grey. I would paint outside a lot, but increasingly working from memory. So this was a piece that I was talking to Zach about, my mentor, just before coming here. And I was starting to do this process of translation where I would start with a drawing, so this one up here, which I made on the beach in St Agnes, where I was staying in the Scilly Isles. And then I would take that drawing and turn it into a kind of cardboard diorama about this big, a cardboard. And I was thinking about how to make a painting have depth and space. And then I would take an image of that diorama and turn it into a painting. So that's what I was doing just before coming here. And these are kind of some of the places that I've painted.
So I think that brings us on to why did you apply to the residency, and then did you have any plans coming into the residency once you found out that you got it?
Yeah, so I would say that I've been living in a city for the past year, Manchester. My studio is in the middle of an industrial estate. It's about 10 metres from Piccadilly train line, and it's just, as you could see probably from my photographs, not at all my normal subject matter. And as a result, I felt my painting was becoming far more insular. I was working far more from memory than I'd ever done before. And I was interested to know whether that was because I was living in a city, and because I didn't have the kind of subject matters I wanted to paint on my doorstep, or I didn't know whether it was just my practice was changing and I was maturing and becoming more and more interested in painting from memory. So I was excited to come down to St Ives and kind of re-enliven my outdoor painting practice. I wanted to do lots of walks,
which you have,
which I've been doing, and lots of drawing, which is these are some of the ones that I've been doing whilst I've been here. What about you?
Yeah, so I had quite a big change in my personal life, like towards the end of 2022, and because my practice is so much about my experience, it's very autobiographical. It made me reevaluate my art practice as well, and thinking about the fact that I think I'd just been on autopilot. Like, once you know how to do something and it works, you just do it. And especially after my tutorial with Catherine, I had to think about how I was making, why I was painting, how I was applying paint. And I think that this residency was an opportunity for me to be out of my comfort zone and to just reboot myself, like turn myself off and on again, and really like indulge in my practice, honour how I've worked in the past and how I know I can work. And I've been looking at themes that I've been looking at when I was at university, to do with lesbian identity, to do with signs, to do with how lesbians and artists both use symbolism to communicate things non-verbally. And I knew that it would be a really fun challenge to come to St Ives and continue that. So that's was my plan, was to have no plan. And it's been great.
We've gone into it completely differently once again.
So what have you been making?
So I've been doing a lot of walking. I don't know, I'm sure if you're local you've heard of it, the Tinners Way between here and St Just. I've been walking that in segments, and I've been so fascinated by the stone circles, and I want to use my, what's it called? Here we go, menhirs and burial chambers and xenoquoits, if I'm saying that right, these kind of places. I had no idea that Cornwall was so mystical, and I've been really fascinated by these places that have such ancient meaning, and how I feel about being here as a kind of tourist, as an outsider. So I've been thinking a lot about that, and I've also been thinking a lot about drama, like Ellie's heard me say the word theatre and stage about a million times.
Yeah,
every time I'm on the
great.
every time I'm on the coast, I see rocks as kind of stage wings, and the light is, and that's, I guess, coming from an interest in landscape painting and how it's always constructed and staged. So I started building these really odd cardboard dioramas.
I love them personally.
Dioramas are like, thank you. Dioramas are sort of miniature 3D models of landscapes, and they have such an amazing history to them, and I love them as a way to think about space within painting. So this was the first one I made, which is a very crude version, and then I would make these, photograph them, and then use them to make paintings. So if you go forward one, you'll see these. This was my first attempt, and I was playing with how abstract I wanted these paintings to be, and then as it's gone on,
so that's me.
well, that's you. As my work's gone on, the cardboard sculptures have become more complicated. This is the one I made of Zenor Quoit, and kind of, it's weird and funny to me that I sat and had lunch here, and I was making this kind of weird model of it. And the paintings that I've been making from these cardboard models, I like how silly they are. I like how these really kind of vast, dramatic, ancient sites have I've made into these flimsy cardboard things with the masking tape showing, and I like the kind of weirdness of that, and how landscape painting is supposed to be quite serious and real, and I'm kind of laying bare all the fragility of the landscapes that I'm trying to construct. So that's what I've been up to.
It's very exciting. Watching it in the studio has been really special for me.
What about you?
So it feels like I've been, as I say, like working from the beginning again, which is really exciting for me. And I think that the way that I've been using paint has been much more intentional, much more urgent, and with thinking, instead of like, how best can I use paint to make this image look how I want it, I'm thinking, how best can I use paint to portray feeling, and to portray how I'm feeling, and to portray how it felt to look at this, or how it might feel to touch it, which for me is different but in a really positive way. And as I say, I was very interested in science and symbolism, and how it is to be here when I feel like I'm coming to a blank slate. And of course there's so much history in St Ives in a way that is kind of unfathomable, but to me, I don't know it. I mean, I do, but in theory I don't know it. So I get to experience it fresh and how that feels. So these are some, you guys might have seen these church signs around St Ives.
They're just outside, are they?
Yeah, they're actually just outside if you turn down there. So I think this is much more quick, and like I was literally just kind of like chucking my paintbrush.
And you paint so quickly as well.
Yeah, this maybe took me like a day and a half, and the other one took me maybe.
Which is a bit overwhelming. I'm there painting my little cardboard models, and Ellie's there like whipping up some paintings. It's funny.
But then also I just come in and I'm like, because I work from photographs that I've taken, sometimes that can feel a bit modern, but I've got to lean into that. And then through looking at those signs, as I said, because I've been so interested in how signs are used in queerness, in lesbianism, I wanted to combine those with how it feels for me to be a lesbian in this space where it kind of feels like there's not a lot visually for me to relate to, or to say, oh, I see that, and to me that is an open sign of queerness. So I've been using the symbols that I already have in my mind and putting them visually into what is existing here. So this is like carabiners is a thing in lesbianism, to communicate that you are a lesbian, but also the side that you put it on your belt.
What is it? The like.
This carabiner here, like, you know, carabiners like to do hiking, which sign you put it on your belt is often to do with like sexuality and who you are sexually. So that was what this image is, and then this is the doors of the studio. And then this was looking at how it is to be queer visually in this overpowering, immense landscape. And again, the paint is much quicker. I was like, I'm not going to sit down and paint sand, like grains of sand. So just like, how does it feel to walk on sand? How does it look to be a queer woman walking on sand? And I've also been doing sketching and drawing, going to pubs, looking at people, observing, writing in a much more intuitive way than I was in London. So I kind of swap things around, which is just really exciting for me.
How has it felt to leave your community of queer artists and queer people and be in St Ives, which is not Southeast London, you know, to say delicately.
I mean, disclaimer, St Ives is beautiful, I love it. I'm incredibly happy here, and it's nice, of course. Not everywhere can be the same place, but gay people exist everywhere, queer people exist everywhere, and I think that it's a really lovely challenge, because you can make work in a bubble very easily, and you can make work about something and then present it to people who already kind of understand it, and then instead of having to think, how do I communicate this to somebody who's got no idea, you're kind of thinking like, oh, like my friends are going to get the joke, this show, they're going to get it, this work is going to make sense in relation to this other work that I'm showing it with. So I have to really think, how do I feel when I'm removed from my girlfriend, when I'm removed from my friends, and just how does it feel almost like academically, theoretically, to be
sorry
yeah, sorry, I could go on forever.
I was just going to say, have you had to remove yourself from it somehow then?
I think so, because you can say like, I'm gay and this is how I feel, and I don't see it represented and I'm unhappy, or you can say, I am who I am, my art is my art, how do I make that experience work visually, when it's very different, how do I make that make sense in the environment that I'm in? And I can be stubborn and be like, you either get it or you don't. But it's been lovely to challenge myself in that way. And I think that I can ask you a similar question, which is that when your work is so much about the landscape, how has it been coming from such an urban city such as Manchester, and then being in this wonderful rural environment?
It's been amazing. I would say I've really welcomed it, because it's, rather than the subject of my work being an hour's drive away, it's become on my doorstep. And so I feel like I have a lot more freedom in terms of how I want to work. You know, I can pop out for a walk, I can come back, do some painting, that kind of thing. But one thing that's really surprised me being here is how much I've wanted to be in the studio. I kind of expected this month for me to be outside walking lots. Like I remember telling Chris and Alexandra that on the first day, like, I'm going to get my walking boots and I'm going to leave. But I've actually been in the studio making work from memory a lot more, which I think shows maybe a shift in my practice. Oh, that's another one of the little dioramas
I think
I've made.
These are one of my personal favourite dioramas of yours. I really like these ones. Have you got the painting of it next?
Painting. It's been really refreshing, I would say.
Yes, and my other question would be that I've noticed that you've been doing more representational paintings, which I know is quite unusual for you, and that your process of abstraction has been slower.
Yeah.
What do you think is the drive behind that, and how are you finding that shift?
Yeah, so I've been painting, so these are images of the little cardboard dioramas, and I've just kind of been painting them quite literally, which is very different for me. And I think they're actually a stage in the middle where I will then move towards abstraction again. I don't see these paintings being an end result. I guess they're a kind of process in a series of translations. That's how I see it, from the landscape to the sketch, to the model, the diorama, to the image, to the painting, and like this kind of ongoing translation of one site, like a series of stone circles or a menhir, and then translating them. And I guess it poses some questions about, well, am I really painting about landscapes anymore? Am I painting more about, am I just using the shapes that I've seen along the Tinner's Way, and am I just using those as really abstract subject matter to really just investigate painting and what it means to paint in abstraction? So I guess I'm far less thinking far less about the landscape itself than I thought I would be.
I think that's something that's really interesting about the way that we because I think the way that we work differently is our strength sharing the studio, which is that you have a process of I'm making these as a journey to create something else. It's maybe going to be very different. Whereas for me, I'm making all the paintings that I make are final paintings, and then the journey is how they communicate between each other, which is very different. But it makes me think much more about like what's my beginning and what's my end, which has been a nice challenge.
And that's something I wanted to ask you, because you sort of just you come into the studio in the morning, you sit down and you just start painting, and a day later there's a painting. And so your process is far less obvious, I guess. In the final piece, or like what is that thought process?
That process is very similar to how it was in London, in that it just comes to me. It's very much that I kind of get like a road to Damascus flash of like the painting, and I see it, and then I need to figure out how best I can use paint to get that down. But the research and the inspiration comes from doing things, being me, having positive experiences, having negative experiences, from sketching. So these are sketches, I don't know how well they're showing up on the screen, but these are sketches from going to pubs, drawing people, listening to their conversations, and then writing. And then I think from doing this, rather than working from the images, this will sort of trigger a painting that comes to me visually. And then it's just getting that down, getting that done kind of as quickly as possible, so then I can do the next one, because they all come so quickly, and the part of it is the conversation that they have between each other, which means the more there are, the stronger they are. So
would you say you're more excited by the process, the thinking, or the painting itself, or is that irrelevant? I don't know.
I think it is both, because you learn especially when you're an artist who's also got like a regular job, you learn to make your process fit into the life that you've already got. So much of this is thinking. So I'm a nanny, and I'll be sort of with the kid doing stuff, and then I'll be like, oh, she just did that, and that colour does this, and okay, like I could make that do this, and okay, the images come together. But I can't just kind of whip out my sketchbook and start doing charcoal, because then she's going to run off and like go over here. So I think it's as much as the thinking as the getting it down. The two things are symbiotic completely.
That makes sense.
Absolutely. I've also been thinking quite a lot about what you've been saying about stages, and I think that is something that we probably accidentally share, which is a lot of drama. Why do you think you're so interested in stages?
That's such a good question. I think I've been interested in them for a really long time, actually, before maybe I was using the word stage, because I don't love theatre. Which is really weird. Like, I feel like I need to start going to plays or something.
I'm going to take you to some plays, Georgina.
I need to go to the V&A and look through all of the like stage
That is
design
one of the best exhibitions in London, in my personal opinion.
Really? Yeah, I need to go.
It's so good. Yeah.
I think it's maybe more coming from landscape painting as the history of the medium.
Yes.
And thinking about how this weird kind of cycle where a landscape painting affects the way we see the land when we're out on a walk, and then that will in turn influence the landscape painting that's made, and it's like this feedback loop where the art that we see, like, you know, you see a cloud and you might think, oh, that's a Constable painting, or I might go down to, you know, or you'd be able to see and you think, oh, like that looks like a Turner painting, or this kind of thing, and it's like that connection between the cultural landscape and the land itself is separate, but they inform each other so much. And I love this idea of kind of laying that bare in a painting and not trying to hide the fact that a landscape painting is a construction, and it's not the land itself, it's something separate. And it's definitely something that a painter comes at with all of their own cultural biases. And so when you're painting a landscape painting, you're constructing the way we see land, which I think is so relevant to today, thinking about how we work with land environmentally, like how we paint land is so tied up in all of that. So, yeah.
Because that's actually, I think, another place where we're similar is the idea of cultural history, and like the history of painting, and then the history of culture, and yours is the culture of landscape, and then mine's maybe like a queer culture. Because art is so, painting especially, has got a history, and when you paint, the second you finish the painting, it goes into a line of history. And even if you don't want it to be, even if you don't want it, your painting will be read within that lineage and it will be understood as part of that. And then you can, I personally love to manipulate that to use things that have been found in painting and then maybe appropriate them or butcher them to get my meaning across. And that is the same in queer culture, which is that even if you don't want it to, as a gay person, especially as a lesbian, the way you choose to present yourself, the way you are, the way it comes from inside you fits within a history. And you fit in that history. And whether you kind of want it or not, you have to learn about it and you have to understand that you will be understood in relation to that history, and you've got to learn best how to control it to make it work for you. And I think that that's especially, I think, what I was doing here, which is trying to think about, in a really little punchy way, how do I pick up on things that exist within art history, things that exist within queer history, and get them to make sense with a row of symbols. So like the Guinness, the horse, these are things that have got that you read, even if, so like this is Joe's Way from My Chemical Romance, and even if you didn't know who that was, you would read that image visually beyond knowing who that is. And I think that that is wonderful, and queer people read queer people almost like a book, even without knowing that they're doing it, because you can sort of scan somebody and go, this. And it's the same with the painting, and I love that, and that is something that I really am trying to bring into my work, and I've been way more hyper aware of since being here.
And is that because of feeling like St Ives is a different environment, like socially, or?
Yes, definitely. I think that London is so busy, London is so loud, and you're surrounded by people who are very similar to you, which is something that I've done deliberately in my life to make me feel safe and secure, but also it's good to be challenged, because then you can really see what you're doing.
Would that connect back to staging?
I think it would, because it's reading a history. The way you read a play, the way you understand a play is the same way that you read a painting, the same way that you read a landscape is the same way that you understand queer history. It's all to do with reading and history.
Or like performance, maybe?
Exactly, and because we are performing when we do our paintings, I think. That's even if it's subconscious, because like I sit down and like listen to my music, and then I'll be like, oh my god, like, oh, this is so frustrating, and get up and like go and like do a dance in the corner and then come back and sit down, whereas you've got your outfits and your coat, and you do big strokes and move this here and move this here, and we'll sort of turn around and be like, do you like what I've done here? Like it feels like it could be staged. It feels like we could have written it.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Maybe we just love living very dramatic lives.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe that's not an artist thing, but you and me thing.
That is probably a nice segue to asking you how you felt sharing a studio, because we didn't know each other before this month. We met on the first day.
Yes, we did.
And we've been living together and working together, so it's been quite intense.
Yes.
And it's, there's a lot of space for us to get really close, which I think we've done. We've got on really, really well.
Yeah, we have.
But what's it been like for you sharing a studio?
Terrible.
I've just set you up to,
it's been wonderful. I don't have a lot of painters in my life. And when I do, often they make representational work like me. And it has been very exciting to see somebody work so differently from me, and also when I've been thinking about how I paint, why I paint, what I paint, you are so aware of that sometimes I just think like I will watch you and be like, would I do that? Do I need to do that? Okay, I'm stealing that. Like, okay, I'm borrowing that. And like sometimes I'll just go and touch your paintbrushes, and like I don't know if you know this, but like because I'm like, oh, what does that one feel? I thought it was quite nice, but just to be like, oh, what does this one feel like? Maybe, oh, okay, that's done that stroke.
Should we do a paintbrush swap?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I mean, it's been fantastic, and I think that this painting that I've done, I realised that when we were planning for this talk that it's like a stage set, which has come from Georgina, and obviously it's
quite muted tones as well.
Yeah, and the subject matter is completely different, but like I think there's quite a lot of similarities between something like that. Especially this one. I think this one and that painting are almost like our versions of the same thing. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been brilliant. Yeah. At first I was a bit tentative of sharing a space with such a different painter. Yeah. But I think it's been so refreshing.
100%.
I think it's been brilliant. I think you've made me want to work more from photographs, which is perhaps what's led to these quite like more realistic. Oh, that's my newest sculpture, by the way. I feel so silly making them, but I love it. This is like a cliff line that I've trying to basically push them towards abstraction, a bit like Peter Lanyon, if anyone knows his work. I'm really inspired by him. But anyway, back to your question. Yeah, it's been, I think it's you being in the studio. I love your routine of coming in and painting. It's so lovely. I'm like, why am I walking outside and getting cold and wet? It's like,
yeah, I'm nice and warm and comfy.
You're nice and warm and comfy with the fire going. So it's made me want to sit down more. And I think that's been really exciting to use like a digital form of working, because I never work from photographs, and suddenly here I have done. And I think you've kind of maybe taken the stigma away of that being like something I shouldn't be doing, because I've been so interested in painting a lived experience, and I've always felt like using a photograph is sort of one step removed from a lived experience, and therefore I shouldn't refer to it. But I've really admired your confidence with using digital media, and I think that's been great. And actually more generally, because your subject matter is so you, and I think be safe to say you kind of put a lot of yourself out there in your paintings. I've been really inspired by that, because as a landscape painter I can very easily hide behind my work. Like, maybe you can tell a lot from me from my work, I'm sure you can, but it's not about, you know, my relationship to my boyfriend, nor is it about my sexuality. And so it's been really exciting to be around someone that you're just so kind of unapologetic with what you paint, and that's been really, really, really nice to share a space with.
Thank you. And I think it's just nice to also be aware of the landscape. Like I can get so bogged down in being like people, and then just to be like, oh yeah, so like I'm going to flick through to the very end, but like this is my most recent painting, and I think it's the most sensitive way I've treated a landscape ever. Normally I just sort of am like, oh, background, that'll come at the end, but I think I'm really like, it's worth paying attention to it now. The one thing I think we haven't asked each other is how it feels to be an outsider, a tourist coming to this wonderful place. I think the thing that I've been thinking about is, what would it have felt like to being a woman living here who perhaps had a husband or a brother or a son out at sea, and coming to a landscape and thinking, wow, this is beautiful, this is glorious, but the sea has no danger for me, I guess. And I've been like super aware of that. And like landscape painting is the history of it is such a sort of privileged middle class or upper class culture, in that, you know, you come to a landscape painting and you call it sublime. But what does it feel like to be in a place where the fishing industry is the reason this place is here, and how I can't understand how it would feel to really be linked to the sea in any way other than as a kind of aesthetic subject. And I still don't really know how I feel about it, to be honest. We have got time. So I guess just being aware of that and thinking about that. What about you? Well, I think it was maybe a little bit more like a bit more obvious for me, just because it's very personal. And I think I was very intrigued with it at the beginning, and it got me thinking about something I studied when I was at university, which is fan studies, and how teenage girls especially, when faced with learning about their sexuality, learning about new things that are happening in their life, will turn to being a fan of something, will turn to a boy band, will turn to Star Trek as a way of a safe, socially acceptable way of exploring these difficult feelings of otherness. And so that's what I've been doing as well. So these are, again, paintings of Dread Away from My Chemical Romance, and how you can use somebody so much in the public eye to understand your feelings of difference, and then also how this is being a fan of something is quite it's quite static, because it doesn't change. You can be in St Ives, you could be in the Outer Hebrides. My Chemical Romance is going to be My Chemical Romance. That's not changing. And it's a way of like monitoring your feelings, and then maybe a little bit less humorously also then looking at Amy Winehouse and Ronnie Spector as women who have suffered immense hardships in the public eye, immense feelings of otherness, and how they used their creative mediums as a way of finding solace in that, and then how I take inspiration visually from Amy Winehouse. Amy Winehouse takes inspiration visually from Ronnie Spector, and then all three of us have had like quite similar life experiences. And I think that is where that's come to. And then also staging, it all ties back together. Absolutely.
That sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
Do we want to ask each other our plans post-residency?
Yeah.
We're about a couple minutes off. Brilliant, okay. Do you want to go first? Plans after St Ives?
My plans are to go home and to carry on doing my job, and I'm going to carry on painting. I've still got my studio, so I'm going to go back to my studio, and I think I'm sure things will come up soon, but I'm going to stretch. All of these paintings are on like quite loose canvas, as you can see here. I'm going to go back, stretch them, and just be far more intentional, far more deliberate, and far more conscious of my practice. What about you? You've got some actual very cool, exciting plans.
So I'm going back to Manchester first. I'm going to keep painting. I've still got my studio there, and I'm really excited to keep pushing this work. I think same as you, we're going to keep working on this stuff that we've started here for
Definitely.
Months, if not years after. And then in autumn, I'm going to walk the Pacific Crest Trail, a little bit of it, which is a West Coast hike with my boyfriend. He's at the back. He's doing the whole thing 6 months, and I'm doing about 5 weeks with him. And so it's backpacking, tent, everything on a back, walking through. It's on the west coast of America, about 100 miles east of the Pacific coast, and I'm really excited about that because it's being outside, it's walking. I'm sure it will influence my practice. And I'm going to bring it. I obviously have to not bring heavy oil paints, and I'm going to bring a little like watercolor palette and a little sketchbook, and I'm excited about that as another kind of residency opportunity.
Absolutely.
So that's our
wonderful
plans.
Yes, the one last thing is that we're having an open studios on Saturday from 4 till 8. If you guys want to come and see our works in person, come and see the Studio 5. There's, as I'm sure you all know, a lot of history in Studio 5. And
a chance to see where Ben Nicholson worked as well. But you can come and have a chat to us. I think we'll open it to questions.
Yes.
If anyone has anything they'd like to ask.
Yes.
Put this away.
Oh, thanks.